To respond to the historic lack of 1890 SNAP Ed funding, the Food Trust collaborated with a number of 1890s to develop a series of conscience-driven recommendations to address the disparity and improve opportunities to participate in SNAP Ed. The recommendations are designed to serve both path forward and a platform for collaboration. 1. Establish equitable SNAP Ed funding for 1890s. SNAP Ed has not received a substantial increase in funding for the past decade, and while efforts to increase overall funding are underway, the historic discrimination for 1890s persists. For 1890s to reach the eligible population, they must have sufficient funding to support administration, programming, and evaluation. A few states have formulated specific percentages for the distribution of SNAP Ed funds to ensure that the 1890s receive an equitable amount of the funding. In many states, the 1862 land-grant university receives all or most of SNAP Ed funding, which limits the 1890s' ability to administer its programs and reach diversity groups of participants. States should specify percentages that provide equitable funding for the 1890s, commensurate with the 1862s. 2. Establish more open and transparent SNAP Ed application and review process. States should provide updated information on applying for SNAP Ed funds that is readily accessible to the 1890s. State agency contact information should readily be available, and requests for applications with clear instructions for applying should be posted for all who are interested. Having clear guidelines and an open application process would allow more 1890s to access SNAP Ed funding. 3. Allow
multiple SNAP Ed implementing agencies and subcontracts per state. Some states have limits on the number of state implementing agencies and/or subcontracts for SNAP Ed, which limits the ability for 1890s to apply for funding. Since many states have 2 land-grant institutions, it is necessary to allow both universities to receive SNAP Ed funds. The barrier of state limits for additional implementing agencies or subcontracts will continue to limit 1890s from receiving their fair share of SNAP Ed funds.
4. Establish accountability for state matching funds for 1890s to support strong institutions. States have historically failed to provide the 1890s the same level of 1-to-1 match dollars that they provide other land-grant institutions that receive federal funding. The Agricultural Research, Extension, and Educational Reform Act of 1998 and the 2002 Farm Bill required states to provide a match starting at 30% and increasing to 100% by 2008. While many states are now receiving their full match, some states still do not receive it, and others have a cumulative debt from the state that has impacted their overall budgets and impacted their nutrition programming. States need to be held accountable for providing their state match in order for 1890s to successfully provide the nutrition services that are needed. 5. Create an open and transparent process for determining the geographical reach for 1890s.
In many states, SNAP Ed programs are geographically limited to avoid duplication with the 1862 and other state implementing agencies. 1890s often are only permitted to reach a small percentage of the counties in their states. While it is important to avoid duplication of SNAP Ed services, it is also essential to establish an open and transparent process for determining geographical reach that allows all implementing agencies to have an equal voice in decisions about where programs can provide services. 1890s have established strong relationships in many communities and with SNAP Ed eligible individuals who would benefit from participating in their programs.
6. Provide technical assistance for 1890 SNAP Ed application with training for new applicants. The 1890s that do not currently receive SNAP Ed would benefit from technical assistance in submitting a SNAP Ed proposal for funding. One way to increase the number of 1890s that submit applications is by providing technical support to reduce the burden on applicants and ensure success. Since states have their own processes and procedures, assistance is mostly needed at the state level, but assistance on the federal guidelines and programming would also be beneficial. 7. Issue multi-year contracts when requested to allow sufficient time to complete programming, especially for first-year applicants. SNAP-Ed guidance allows states to submit an annual or multi-year plan. Multi-year plans can cover a 2 or 3-year period. USDA recommends that states consider developing multi-year SNAP-Ed plans. However, several 1890s only receive annual plans or have been offered a 1-year contract by the state agency. Multi-year plans are beneficial both to allow sufficient time to hire and train new staff, but also to demonstrate progress on their interventions over time. 8. Establish annual meetings for 1890 SNAP-Ed programs to support program sharing and learning. 1890s expressed a strong interest in having an annual meeting to discuss SNAP-Ed programming and to learn from one another.
Annual meetings are an important way for 1890s to provide mutual support and build strong programs. Instituting an annual in-person meeting for all 1890s will help programs grow.
9. Explore SNAP-Ed barriers and opportunities for 1994 land grant universities. The 1994 land grant institutions, 1994s, are Native American tribally controlled colleges and universities that were granted land grant status under the Act of Congress in 1994. The 1994s primarily serve Native American populations that are typically located in remote, underserved communities. Their mission involves teaching, community outreach, and research. With respect to SNAP-Ed funding, the 1994s are similar to the 1890s, but to date have received even less SNAP-Ed funding than the 1890s. It is important to document the funding disparity and explore the SNAP-Ed barriers and opportunities for the 1994s to better understand and offer recommendations for achieving equitable SNAP-Ed funding to ensure that they can provide the needed food and nutrition services. The 1890s and the Food Trust are committed to working together to implement these 9 policy recommendations to support all individuals and families to lead healthier lives. 1890s have successfully demonstrated their ability to improve the lives of the nation's most vulnerable, yet too often do not receive equitable funding from programs such as SNAP-Ed. Efforts to increase the number of 1890s that administer SNAP-Ed will lead to improving equity and reducing the incidence of diet-related disease. To accomplish this, a number of barriers need to be addressed. State agencies, 1890s, and 1862s should work together to develop processes for equal access to financial resources and technical assistance. State legislators also must provide a required match for all land-grant universities. Most 1890s have been deprived of SNAP-Ed funds and the opportunity to participate in equitable practices for administering the program for far too long. By working together on implementing the recommendations set forth in this report, these complementary entities can better serve our community's most vulnerable populations and ensure that everyone has a seat at the table.